Well, the big tech industry is frequently at the center of controversy these days. The so-called FANG companies face criticism for policy, surveillance of users, and just sheer marketplace dominance. 80% of corporate wealth is controlled by just 10% of the world's companies, 10%. And 90% of internet searches are on Google, and roughly 90% of global ad spending goes to Facebook or goes to Google. The two companies have just about perfected the art of collecting and monetizing users' personal information. And almost every smartphone in the world runs on software that's created by Google or Apple. And up until last year, one of those companies, Google, followed the corporate mantra, "Don't be evil." The phrase now serves as the title of a new book, Don't Be Evil, How Big Tech Betrayed Its Founding Principles and All of Us. Rana Foroohar is the author of that book, and she's also a global business columnist at the Financial Times, and she joins me now. Rana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You know, you followed this very closely, but I'm just curious, how did you decide to write a book on this?
Well, it got very personal for me. I came home one day and opened a credit card bill, and I thought I'd been hacked because there were all these tiny charges in $1.99, $3 increments, and then I thought, wait a minute, they're all from the App Store. Who else has my password? My 10-year-old son. Turns out he had been racking up charges in an online video game that is supposedly offered for free. But you know, you can download a lot of these games, and then you get in and you end up buying all kinds of things in the course of the game. And it made me start to wonder about this business model. And so I dug into it, and I found that really this is about tracking us. It's about monetizing our attention, and it has led to some of the incredible monopoly power, which you see in the numbers you just laid out.
You know, you talk about, it's so fascinating to hear about your son and that personal, the video game industry.
So many people have that story.
We do. I mean, my son is 8 and he's really into it now, video games, and I'm seeing sort of the addiction forming on this. But, you know, you talk about their personal data. They have so much information on you, and they're able to monetize it.
Absolutely. You know, data is the new oil in the economy. You know, as we shift into a digital world in which really everything is going to be about information, how much you can collect, what you can analyze, we are the raw material. We are being mined, we are being watched, and regulators are starting to realize this. You know, we're always playing catch up when there's a new business model like this, trying to figure out what the companies are doing. A lot of people are becoming very concerned about what this means for things like election meddling, which has been in the news, but also competitiveness in the U.S. The number of startups has been going down because these companies have gotten so big, and just the cognitive changes in our brains and how we're going to divide up this pie of data. Maybe we should be getting some of that value back that is being mined from us by these large tech companies.
A lot of people have asked that question. You know, will people eventually be able to get money back for the data that they...
Well, and California is already actually thinking about this. They have a plan called Digital Dividends, which is about really giving back some of that material. They're even talking about a digital sovereign wealth fund. So in the same way that Alaska or Wyoming have given citizens some money from the natural resources in those states, if data is the new raw material that we all need, maybe we should be getting some of that value back.
Well, you talk in your book sort of how you had big tech, this great shiny thing, and then all of a sudden it betrayed its founding principles. What do you mean by that in the book?
Well, it's interesting. You know, if you go back, and I chose Google because it's really the best 20-year arc of this industry, and it went from utopia to dystopia. But if you go back to the original paper that was done by the founders of Google in 1998, it kind of predicts where we are today. They talk about the problems associated with targeted advertising as a business model. They talk about how it could be misused. So I think people saw this coming, but there was so much money in this business that it was really hard not to pursue that business model. You
talk about the money. A lot of people also talk about misinformation, Google and Facebook. Can these organizations really self-police?
I don't think so. I mean, frankly, every time Mark Zuckerberg is on the Hill or giving a speech, it's clear to me that they can't self-police. We're hearing just today about some new scandals within Facebook, staffers trying to alert higher-ups to misinformation issues. This is endemic. Every 5 minutes there's a new news peg, and I think this is the new too-big-to-fail industry. I think that regulators are going to have to figure out a way to make the pie sharing more equal, to make sure that we're safe and our data is protected.
Why is it, and this is always a question I always ask people, why do you feel it is that in Europe they seem to be so much more ahead than we are here?
You know, I think that they have that World War II history and that long history of knowing how data collection can be misused, what that can lead to. So I think it's really front and center for them. But as I said, California is actually moving ahead and setting what may become a national standard. They've got some pretty tough privacy laws now. I think you're also going to see the big tech firms possibly being regulated the way that railroads were in the 19th century. You know, railroad barons used to go in and they owned the network, they owned the cars, they owned the coal in the cars. That's the same paradigm for an Amazon or a Google. It could be that they can own the network, but maybe not everything on it.
You know, you also write in the book, you talk about China, and you said at one point the U.S. was the dominating force in the high-tech sector, but now China is the world's largest supplier of telecommunications equipment. What does that mean for the U.S.?
Well, it's a big deal. I think we're headed to a fundamentally bipolar world in which the U.S. and China go in different directions in terms of trade, how to regulate the internet, how data is protected. In China, you know, you have no assumption of privacy. It is a surveillance state, and there are actually social credit systems where people are watched online and they can be denied a mortgage or health care if they're doing and saying things that the government doesn't like. So we have to make some pretty important decisions about how we want the rules of our digital space to be, and what that means for human rights, free will, democracy.
You know, you talk about just how big China is in the tech industry. The balancing act, what is the balancing act for tech providers? Do they have some responsibility in countries like China?
Well, I think they do, and I think that they've tried to play it both ways. You know, you often hear big tech companies, and you know, Mark Zuckerberg talks about this, Google, former Google chair Eric Schmidt will say, look, it's hard to break up big tech because we are the national champions against these Chinese companies that would otherwise eat everyone's lunch. I just don't buy that because, you know, Google does business in China. Facebook would love to be doing business in China. Amazon would do business in China if it wasn't for Alibaba. I just think that these two countries are fundamentally different systems, and I'm not sure that Facebook, as it is governed now, is really compatible with liberal democracy. You know, you look at the way in which trust in liberal democracy is falling in countries where social media usage and platform technology is higher, and I think we're going to have to look at that very carefully.
Rana Foroohar, the book is called Don't Be Evil, fascinating look at big tech and the world around it. Thank you, Rana,
Thanks
very
for
much for
having
joining
me.
us.